Good afternoon, everyone. Have to pinch myself. I'm standing in my own gallery with a Joe Bradley show. I've been a fan of Joe's work for a really long time, but thinking about when it really threw the switch was a little more than 10 years ago when you had first your show at Gavin Brown's in the meat packing district, which was called Lotus Beater, which was a show of abstract paintings that was just riveting and energizing. And then a year later, your earlier work, the Schmagoo paintings, were part of MoMA's show, They're Forever Now. And the range between these two kind of approaches and expressions was so extreme and was so sort of created such a sense of optimism for painting that I really wanted to work with you. Hey, sometimes you just have to wait. It was amazing. Anyways, this show you call Vom Abend, and since I'm the resident German, I'll translate, and then I'll let these guys work it out. Vom Abend is from the evening, and it's a very poetic kind of phrase, and I believe it's really about capturing a mood, right? The mood between dusk and when the night begins.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah. I think it's a very beautiful title. I want to thank my daughter Marlene, who started this conversation that ended right here, or begins right here. So thank you, Marlene. And I'm so thankful to Dan Nadel for speaking with Joe about the work. Dan and Joe go back many years. I know you wrote on the Albert Knox exhibition catalog. I think you also wrote on something for Eva Presenhuber recently. Yeah. Show that you had in Zurich or
in
Vienna. Vienna, right? Yes, exactly. Yes. So without further ado, here are Joe and Dan, and thank you so much. I couldn't be more excited.
Thank you, David. How to begin?
How to begin? Well, I want to start with the title of the show. As David alluded, it is a very poetic title and also imbued with meaning because it's from the evening, but these paintings to me are so jubilant and they dance like the end of or in the midst of a beautiful evening. And I wondered why you chose the title and how you found it, how you came to that title.
I found the title, and I'm not a German speaker, so
I'm aware.
At some point passed it by David to make sure that it wasn't wildly inappropriate or anything, and he
wildly
he
inappropriate
approved,
would have been good.
I found it on it was the name of a children's book, and my wife Valentina. We have young kids, and she collects children's books. When we travel, sometimes we'll buy books, and there was a beautiful German book, and the title of the book was Vom Abend. And it was the working title for this show. It took me maybe 6 weeks to bother to find out what it meant, Like I just...
Oh, it just sounded good?
Yeah, I liked the ring. I thought it had a nice sort of sound. I liked the way it looked written down. And then when I did find out what it meant, it felt right, and it, in terms of, it really jived with the kind of mood of these paintings, which, as you say, I think there is a lot of that transition either between daytime and nighttime or dawn or dusk
and all the things that can happen in between.
Yeah. So there you go. And I mean, I love it when something kind of rolls up to my feet like that, It's meant to be.
Did you start thinking about the paintings? Did you start almost painting towards the title at some point?
I think it helped me to sort of, I do think it influenced my sort of thinking, and it helped kind of consolidate the way the show was coming together. I'm really happy with the title. I think it's sort of pitch perfect, if I may say so, you know.
I mean, all the titles of all the paintings are very particular as well. Each one, I started to, as I was walking around today and looking at images yesterday, I started thinking that each painting was a sort of almost an iconic kind of mood. And I wanted to ask you in particular about Kalparush over here, which in Hindu mythology is the personification of time. And you know, and this is a painting where I see a moon and suns and landscapes, multiple time periods. And I wondered if you were sort of thinking about time and thinking about also, I know you've studied quite a bit about Hinduism and meditation. Like, are you working towards a sort of devotional approach almost?
Not exactly, although I have read relatively deeply in that kind of world, and everything that I read and listen to sort of ends up filtering into the work in one way or another. Again, I mean, the painting was finished by the time the title came around, but it felt like it was very much appropriate for the painting itself. But you know, best case for me, like the title, I think should sort of set sort of the tone for looking at the painting, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Sort of create a kind of ambiance around the painting without necessarily, you know, leading the viewer in one way or another, or suggesting that it's about anything in particular.
Although they are very specific.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, I really love the Nirguna over here.
Yeah.
And Occident.
An Occident is.
An Occident might happen. Yeah.
The name of the place when the sun hits the horizon.
Oh, I didn't know
way
that.
Down. So, and I also kind of liked its proximity to the word accident.
Yeah. And accident is a big part of your activity.
Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely an important ingredient.
So when you're making a show like this, and it does feel like a very cohesive show, I mean, what kind of parameters did you set up and then like immediately break for yourself? I mean, did you have?
I mean, I always think in terms of the group, you know, and I work on a number of paintings simultaneously leading up to an exhibition, and you know, sometimes a painting that looks really good will end up getting dropped, something happens and it doesn't make the cut, or one painting that is dead last will end up kind of, it's like a little horse race, you know.
Yeah.
But parameters, I don't know if I really think in those terms. I mean, I know that there's, you have these sort of informal rules that you work within, and then you bend the rule or break the rule, and in that sort of motion, the thing moves forward.
Yeah.
You know? And that's just,
And are some of those rules, I mean, a lot of these clearly begin with quadrants of color that you're laying down, and then maybe scraping away and building up. How?
Yeah. And there's, you know, like for instance, for a little while, I really exiled drawing from my paintings.
Yeah, for a bunch of years.
Yeah, for a bunch of years, it was just kind of passages of color knocking into one another. And maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I broke that rule and introduced drawing back into the process, and it really kind of sped things. It was almost like I was working with an arm tied behind my back, you know. And so it really kind of, it sort of sped the plow, you know.
Yeah, I mean, drawing is back in these paintings in a big way. I mean, in a way that I haven't seen you do really since the Shmagoo paintings, in terms of creating recognizable linear forms. And I wondered if that was, I mean, what is your drawing process in paint? I know what your drawing process is on paper, and you draw voraciously.
Have sort of moved closer together.
Yeah?
And there was a real desire at a certain point. I felt that the drawings, the works I was making on paper were kind of out ahead of the paintings in a way.
How so?
They just felt more interesting, you know? And I think there's something about the freedom in drawing that sometimes that happens. You get a little ahead of yourself on paper. And I think, you know, it just took a minute to screw up the courage to sort of join those two worlds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And does drawing, you know, in a painting like, well, in the painting right behind us, for example, which is very drawing heavy, screwing up the courage to create something as recognizable as like a quarter profile?
Yeah, I think maybe I would have been embarrassed to do that a few years ago. And now I think, why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
Is that when I went to see your studio a couple months ago, it was the first time I'd come in and you had reference images pinned up next to each painting.
Yeah.
And I wondered about that process, because some of you know, Joe's a sort of an omnivorous collector of ephemera and books and records, and I always think of you as bringing in all this material to digest and sift through.
Yeah, no, I mean, I keep a lot of source material around the studio, and it was just a practical move. I found that I would see something that felt like it related to a painting, and then it would get lost in the shuffle.
Right.
So it was a way of kind of keeping things. I'm trying to be a little more organized, Dan.
Sorry, we're getting older, and
Yeah, my
I
memory
can't remember
is
these
slipping.
things anymore. It's really...
Yeah. And also, it's appealing to me to kind of really engage with, you know, like Picasso or something, you know, just
Right.
to really sort of, rather than beat around the bush, just to really kind of borrow things, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Who else looms large in the studio? I mean, you've got a collection of a painter whose name is escaping me right now.
Freddie Bryce.
Freddie Bryce, which I love.
Yeah, no, I mean, I look at everything, and but certainly, you know, let's say Calder. Calder has been a real kind of, he's been on my mind quite a bit. Just as, I came across a quote from Calder recently. It was just, I want to make things that are fun to look at. And I thought, is it legal? Is that, you know what I mean? Could it be that simple? And even if
Right.
it gets, of course it gets more involved, but to have that sort of sentiment around, I think is good for me.
Yeah, to make something that actually might be as funny and enjoyable as possible.
Just to kind of make things that you like, too.
Yeah.
Or to make things that I like
Why, at some point did you feel like you were torturing yourself to stay within a certain parameter that you didn't necessarily like?
I mean, I have a complicated relationship to my own work. I think I'm self-critical, and so it's not always so sunny.
Yeah.
But I think that kind, you know, Calder is a great influence in terms of just how playful the work is and how kind of lovable it is.
Yeah, and also how much line gets in. And I mean, thinking about Calder and form and line, and sort of those suns and those mountains, I could see that visual influence as well in the work.
No, I'm quite attracted to that kind of like cosmic, you know, like mid-century cosmic abstraction. Like Miro and Calder and Paul Klee.
Yeah. All that stuff.
Yeah.
But in your case,
Real cutting edge. Cutting edge.
Yes, it's on the. All the kids are talking about Nero. That's right. But in your case, what's interesting with the lines and what happens in between them is it feels like you're creating, when you reintroduce drawings, it feels like you created almost more opportunity for you to go deeper into the paintings. Little areas for you to really investigate.
Sure. Yeah. No, I agree. And I think, I mean, I always want the painting to be legible kind of from across the room, you know, to sort of hit the viewer all at once, and then if you're interested to kind of zero in and take a closer look,
Yeah.
there's more, but it's...
Yeah, they unfold.
Yeah, I think that this white drawing and white paint, you'll see as a sort of connective tissue in this group, and I don't know, I like the way it's sort of projection into the room, you know, it feels like very readable in a way.
Well, not just readable, but also I wondered if you thought about how they all sort of shape the room, because having this white line all the way through kind of makes the whole room feel more intimate. There's a sense that you're following a melody all the way through in a way.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I work on the whole ensemble, so I think about it as a group in studio, and relationships will form, but you know, like say like those two paintings.
These two
couldn't be separated. They were sort of like joined at the hip, you know, in studio.
What did you see in them that made you?
I don't know. I mean, it's nothing too heavy. It's just
no,
like
I know.
You kind of get attached to the idea that they belong together. And, yeah.
And I remember, this is a lot of people to move around, so you guys can look at it afterwards, but the painting on that wall, the Angel's Trumpet.
Yes, yeah.
Is, I remember coming to see you, and that hadn't quite made the cut yet in the group. It was an outlier.
Yeah, I mean, that was a stubborn painting.
Yeah.
And also I think it's maybe the most overtly figurative painting in the show, yeah.
And the painting to the right of it is called Together. And I wondered if that was sort of a family portrait, because it's the most directly kind of multi-figure painting I've seen you make.
I don't know if I had thought of it in those terms, but maybe. I mean, it's funny, again, like, you know, staging a show, it's like, it's all very, this was just, you know, I was working on all of this work 10 days ago, so it's sort of, it's almost too soon.
Was it that down to the wire?
It always is, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's almost like too soon for me to I don't have a real kind of objective view of the work yet.
Till 10 days ago. And how long?
You know what I mean.
I know. Not literally.
Little drips and drabs. Yeah.
And how many years was it in the making for this group? Was it a couple of years?
A couple of years, yeah. Yeah, I would say most of these paintings went through a couple of years of studio time. Not to say that there were, you know, there was constant attention on all of them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of kind of, they'll kind of be there in my back pocket. And, but yeah, a couple of years.
I know, it's funny. Something you've always talked about is the time in the studio of just sitting.
Yeah.
Of sitting and letting things be for a while. I mean, some paintings you let sit for months and then come back to.
The sitting to painting ratio is.
Yeah, what is that ratio
appalling.
Exactly? Yeah.
Sometimes
because we've sat for hours.
Yeah, no. If there was like
neither of us was working.
Closed caption, you know, it's sort of like if you were. Sometimes I feel like a security guard at, you know, like one of those guys who sits and there's like 10 little televisions, you know, and you kind of just keep an eye on things. And you might have to grab your flashlight and run and, you know.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that.
Really?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that might do it for us, unless there are any questions? Anything? No? All right, well, thank you, Joe.
Thank you.